welcome to the SnoWest Show. I'm Ryan Harris. Real quick, this episode is brought to you by 320 Guest Ranch, located in Big Sky, Montana. It's only 5 minutes away from Buck Ridge and Carrot Basin. 320 Guest Ranch offers lodging and accommodations for your next snowmobiling trip. Single cabins and large full cabins with kitchens are available. Check it out at 320ranch.com. Also sponsoring the SnoWest Show this year, Fly Racing is the #1 gear brand in Supercross and Motocross, and they bring that same product innovation to snowmobiling. Whether it's monosuits, helmets, boots, gloves, or goggles, Fly Racing has you covered for your snowmobiling gear head to toe. Check them out at flyracing.com or at flyracing.snow on socials. And thanks to Deviant Ink for sponsoring the show. Head on over to deviantink.com and check out their custom wrap builder with new interactive design tools that make designing and customizing wraps easy. Their new colorizer tool randomizes color combinations until you land on the look that you love. Then try the design mixer tool to see all the Deviant Ink designs in the colors that you've selected. Check it out at deviantink.com. Thanks for listening, and now back to the show. Hey everybody, welcome to the SnoWest Show. I'm Ryan Harris, joined here today with two of our test riders, Bruce Kerbs and Justin Stevens. We just wrapped up our first episode talking about the 2026 Skidoos. The first episode hits on the 2026 Skidoo. Man, I can't believe it's 2026 already.
It's crazy. You're old.
I'm not as old as either of you guys.
Dang it.
Yeah.
2026 Skidoo Summit Expert is what we're talking about today. This is if you're unfamiliar with the Skidoo lineup, the deep snow segment of the Skidoo lineup starts with the Skidoo Summit SP Adrenaline, which is just kind of the base model. You can buy that any time of the year in a dealership. And then they have what's called their spring order exclusives. That would be the Skidoo Summit X.
Yep.
The Skidoo Summit X with Expert package, which is what we're talking about today. And then the Skidoo Freeride. Those are all three deep snow, spring-only snowmobiles. You have to go order these at your dealership by the spring order deadline. And so today we're talking about the Skidoo Summit Expert. This thing had some pretty big changes. It didn't get all of the weight reduction changes that the Skidoo X got, the Summit X got. The X got 14 pounds taken off of it with 12 pounds of actual material and then 2 pounds of coolant.
Liquid. Right.
The Skidoo Expert, the Summit Expert, did get some weight reduction. It's 6 pounds lighter on the 154, 8 pounds lighter on the 165. And that's the 165 lost more weight because, again, they went to a shorter tunnel, shorter cooler.
Right.
And so the 165 being a longer tunnel lost more coolant.
Yeah.
So that's why it got a little bit lighter. Other weight reduction on the 2026 Summit Expert, you lost your biggest chunk of weight off the tunnel. So again, we've talked about they shortened up the tunnel by almost 2 inches.
Mm-hmm.
The 154 is 45 millimeters shorter than previous year. The 165 is 61 millimeters shorter than previous year. Your coolant capacity decreased, so 2 pounds less coolant.
Yeah.
The top of the tunnel, the material is thinner. The corners and side walls of the tunnel, the material is thinner. The part of the running board that attaches to the tunnel sidewall, that's thinner. They just kind of went in and they've got all their CAD software and everything to put in their math or whatever and figure out how this would affect it structurally. And then they go out, they build this lighter tunnel, go out and test it and ride it and make sure it stands up, do their product validation. And then they've got a new front suspension on the Expert, the S32, and that's kind of what we're going to focus on this show is the S32 front suspension. That's lighter as well. So they lost weight by going to that. And I mean, it's narrower. It's got to be lighter.
Yeah.
There, but the shocks are lighter. The steering system is lighter. And then that's pretty much where your weight reduction came from. So again, 6 pounds lighter on the 154 Summit Expert, 8 pounds lighter on the 165 Summit Expert. But let's dive into that front suspension. So the S32, Bruce, what did they do different on the actual steering?
Well, they come out with a new twin-link steering design. So totally new design, for their steering system, which actually looks really cool. They had a display up there, and I'm sure you'll maybe put a picture on when we do this. But
yeah,
they kind of had just the steering there with no other part of the sled, so you could really see how it ties together. Everything is moves together. Like there's no really pivot points, right, on that. So everything's pretty smooth.
Yeah, it actually looked super simple.
Yeah,
Like it's kind of
like
it's
where's
oh,
that
we just
been
put
the
one
last
linkage
30 years?
one and one linkage going the opposite direction, and I think got rid of all the fluff and everything going on that creates some of that
slop,
loose or slop or
Yep.
that you
Yeah,
feel
they
sometimes.
got rid of all of the well, not all of the free play, but pretty much all of the free play. There's no like any snowmobile, you can wiggle the handlebars a little bit, and the ski tips don't move. This thing doesn't have that. Like it's pretty precise.
Yeah, it's almost like it's one rod to each ski.
Yeah, that's cool.
So that was really cool. And then they went to the 32-inch ski stance, which is really narrow.
Yeah.
And really interesting. But I think with time on that sled, I think that would be you'd get used to it, and that'd be a dang fun sled.
And it's a 32-inch stance that's not adjustable.
Non-adjustable.
So it's
straight up 32.
Yeah, they did that to eliminate some of the slop too, because when you have an adjustable ski stance, that means that the bottom of your spindle is narrower, and then you're using spacers so that you can move the ski in or out on the spindle.
Yeah.
But that creates a little bit of flex.
Yep.
So by going to a spindle where the bottom of the ski leg is full width of the opening in the ski where it mounts, now it doesn't flex.
Yeah.
So all of this whole steering system is to get rid of any free play, any slop, any flex.
Yep.
Just make it more precise.
Yeah.
And it's not really just the steering. I mean, so it sounded like and it looked like with what they explained there, like to go to the 32, I mean, they had to change actually the shock angle. I think they mounted it to the lower A arm, right, instead of the
Lower on the lower A arm.
lower on the lower A arm.
oh.
Like
Right.
the lower A arm used to have like a mount that came up.
Yeah.
From
so they moved that.
So that's
dropped
lower.
it.
Yeah.
And then the spindle's different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, so the ski leg is taller overall. Because if you look at like a 34 and then you just bring the ski in an inch on each side, they wanted to maintain that geometry, but to hit that point, you're going to be, because when you come in, now you're going up on the control arms.
Yeah.
So now the ski leg has to be taller to mount at the same spot.
yeah.
So the geometry is pretty much the same. You're just bringing it in, and you don't want to bring it in and then make your control arms at a different angle.
Yeah.
Point down more.
Yeah.
So I was pretty shocked on that. I wasn't expecting a narrower front end.
Yeah, I wasn't either.
Like I thought 34 was like
Almost
still
the limit.
considered narrow. Now,
Yeah.
Which the 32, it's really interesting because they were sitting out front and you're looking at the skis and with the way those panels come down, I mean it kind of looked not goofy, but it was just like, holy cow. Like I know it's only 2 inches, so maybe 2 inches is a lot, but I mean it looked crazy narrow.
Yeah.
Like just sitting there.
Yeah.
Let alone riding it, but it just, I don't know.
Well, like when the 34 inch came out, that was on the Gen 4 chassis.
Yeah.
They did that the last year. The Gen 4 chassis put that 34 inch front end on it, and that looked the same way. It's like,
Yeah.
holy crap, that's narrow.
Yeah, so now this is like the panels come down, and I mean it's like they almost come down and drop right alongside the two skis. So it just, I don't know, it was surprising how skinny it looked.
And I remember Jeremy Mercier when we were at a meeting with all the Skidoo engineers earlier this year, and you get into these brainstorm sessions, and they're just like, well, where do you think we need to go? What do you see the future of mountain sled design? What should we try next? What are just wild ideas? And one of Jeremy's ideas was like, we need to get back to the old Elan days, Skidoo Elan days, or Scandic or whatever, where it's just a tiny little machine. It's just so narrow that there's no like jumping on one side of the snowmobile to wrestle it over
It's like
on the
riding
side.
a bike or something.
And I thought he was on. I thought, man, I don't want to go out. I don't want to go down to like an old Skidoo Elan, like because we were talking about going shorter and narrower and everything, but this nails like that concept, like narrower.
Still snowmobile.
Like, brought this thing in like 2 inches narrower. It's as narrow as the bodywork, which is crazy. And they talk about like the contact patch of the snowmobile. There's more track touching the snow now on a side hill because of the narrower.
Yeah.
Because if you think about like tipping in with a wider front end, you're kind of pushing the nose of the snowmobile out away from the mountain.
Yeah, which
and so,
means it has to come up more or less track on the snow, right? So
Yeah, so going super narrow. Now you're bringing the nose into the snow and more track on there. The thing
Right.
really
Just cool.
drives.
Yeah.
Like it hooks up and drives for sure.
Plus, I know they mentioned that the balance line changes. So if you have two lines drawn between where you do touch track and where you go out to where your ski attachments are, I mean, a couple inches in, that totally changes the actual balance. Which I think sometimes it's hard to know on a snowmobile. I mean, you think about your body weight and your position, the engine, the sled. You've got this sled with this low center of gravity, but you've got your body weight. And I think like an inch doesn't sound like much, but I guarantee that inch on that lower section up clear through your body weight is actually very significant.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
More than you think.
Well, especially on a steeper side hill.
Yeah.
You get more track on that side hill. Go
Yeah.
into steeper country and with more control. So
Yeah.
it's pretty cool how they think of that stuff.
It is, yeah.
Honestly.
And to accommodate this, because that whole front suspension geometry changed, they had to design a new shock.
Mm-hmm.
So and while they did that, they made it lighter. So it's it's a lightweight shock. They actually had to move the piggyback reservoir up higher, so that it doesn't touch the upper control arm when it's compressed.
Yeah.
And then didn't they say that?
It's thinner wall too, isn't it?
Yeah. So yeah, the whole thing about the shock is lighter.
Yep.
And then they just had to make it so that the suspension could compress fully without that piggyback touching the control arm. So that's all kind of a new design. But the steering, like on that cutaway, or not the cutaway, but the display that they had, like it's literally just the steering post goes down, and then kind of like a pitman arm setup, but without an actual pitman arm.
Yeah.
It just connects to these two linkage pieces, which are like that, and then it just turns the steering arms. Like you're directly connected to your steering rods.
Yeah.
And they were saying it's like the benefit of rack steering, which is what the Freeride has.
Right.
But that's a heavier system, like the Freeride gain weight because of the rack steering, with the feel of the pitman arm, and then because it's more like a pitman arm style steering, and they took the slop out of everything, they were able to eliminate bump steer. Well, cut bump steer by 52%. So and I'm not an engineer. I'm from Idaho Falls. So Idaho Falls schooling system being what it is, this is my understanding of bump steer. Like as the suspension compresses, the skis go in and out.
Yeah.
So say you're on a side hill and you're compressing that suspension, it's actually going to move the nose a little bit every time the bump. So that's kind of one of the things when you cross an old track.
Yeah.
And you're compressed the suspension.
Or true
and it's, you're feeling that, but it's also moving the snowmobile a little bit.
Yeah.
So if you eliminate that bump steer, they say on this S32 with the new steering system, like the skis just travel straight.
Yep.
Like as that suspension compresses, your width to width doesn't change as it compresses.
Yeah, they're not.
I think you've got that in the video. Probably have to upload it here, but it was crazy to see how it just literally moves almost straight up and down.
Yeah.
And so they thought through way more than just let's make this thing 32 inches wide.
Mm-hmm.
It probably sounds really simple, but I think it's pretty complicated what they did here to make it what it is. So
yeah, because if we would have tried to make this thing, take an old steering system and make it 32 inches wide, it would involve a sawzall and a whipper.
yeah, we'd have a problem.
Exactly.
And
a big hammer to make things fit.
And it turns sharper. It turns so you got 30% more steering angle. So it actually turns sharper, which you made a comment. Maybe that benefits your counter steer because you can get the handlebars farther. The ski,
body position, and counter steer was kind of what I was thinking of. I mean, it's hard to know, but because it's funny what the 30% on the ground. It was really cool on their display. They had the dotted line for the old steering, and then a solid line for the new angle, steering angle, and it doesn't look significant, especially since it's only about a foot long. But you run that out quite a ways. I mean, that's a pretty huge angle change. So I'm guessing it allows you to maybe maintain a little bit different body position. Maybe roll the sled into the hill a little bit easier or quicker, or I don't know. So
yeah.
Well, would that affect your counter steer? When you're on these sleds, you got to counter steer a little more versus your cat players, just because of the steering. But you gone narrower, you can turn more. I mean, is that less energy to counter steer into a hill? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Both them adding up. Almost, you can stay neutral more, I guess. you could definitely override it. And I know Fred talked about that. Get out there, and the first thing you're gonna do is override it because we're narrower and more steer. But
Did you guys ride that one in or out of the goat trails at all, or?
no.
I'm curious. But
No.
I know they said 52% less bump steer. I was curious if that.
Yeah, we didn't ride it out.
Yeah, we didn't get a chance to be because we started
Hit the
on
road.
we started on the X, and we came out on a bit of a groom trail.
Wide trail. Yeah, nice.
It was a long day. We were late, and yeah,
The free ride was stuck.
took the quick way out.
Yeah.
But yeah, we didn't get this S32 on one of those really bumpy, narrow access trails.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see if that skis stay because sometimes they're darty.
Yeah, I mean,
But
when
if your
you
skis are going straight up and down, would
I
that
hadn't-
keep you straight?
Yeah, I hadn't thought much about the bump steer, but one of the things I think you feel a lot of times on that sled when you're running up a trail is like when it does hit, you feel that deflection. So I was curious if it maybe had a little less deflection on a trail or bumpy sled, bumpy area. I'm guessing it does.
Well, one thing they talked about is when you go ride this, try to hit old track. Try to side hill across old tracks and feel that firm snow underneath because that's where a Skidoo. They worked on it last year. They worked on it the year before to try to reduce that.
Yeah.
The
Different
DS4
skis,
pilot
yep.
ski.
Mm-hmm.
The way the rear tail of that ski is shaped, like that was engineered to do that. And so we spent we kind of covered all the changes on here before we dive into the ride. Shorter tunnel, thinner materials, smaller cooler capacity. This does get the new ice scratchers. So there's a new shape, new design. It's a new position. It's designed, the new ice scratcher is designed to push more snow inside the rear suspension.
Right. To help with the shorter cooling unit, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, which increases cooling efficiency. More durable scratcher. Let's see. Snow flap. It did get the new snow flap, which is a smaller brake light, tail light assembly. Slightly lighter. What was that? A few grams lighter.
Yeah.
It did not get the coilover rear suspension. Didn't get any of those things that the X got. So the X focused on getting lighter. And this is where the two sleds kind of deviate from each other, take different paths. The X is getting significantly lighter. The Expert also got lighter, but they're going after precision, like the S32 front end. So the Expert gets narrower front end. Expert gets coilover rear suspension and quite a bit lighter. So they're kind of taking different paths here.
Yeah.
What do you think the benefit? So I guess I get where they're going with this, and I mean the Expert. We've talked about the handling of the Expert. We've liked it more than we liked the Summit X in the past, but now you're saying you like when we talked about in the last podcast the Summit X, you like the handling there better, and we've kind of always liked the Expert. Was it not necessary to do the rear end? I know they did all the tunnel stuff, so they lost their weight there, but I'm kind of curious why they didn't put that rear skid and shock system into the Expert.
I think it's intentional. Like if we put everything on everything, then it's the same thing.
Right.
If they put all of these updates on the Expert and then just have the narrower front end, well, it's just an X with a narrower front end and a non-pivoting, non-flex track.
Yeah.
So I think they're intentionally trying to make things different. And then if you put the coilover suspension on the X, then that kind of isolates it as this new model here. And these guys, we're not getting new chassis like we used to.
Yeah.
We've reached the point on all three brands where it's like trucks. It's like this is about as good as we can engineer a chassis. Now what else can we do around this?
Yeah.
So we're not getting new chassis every 3 to 5 years.
Right.
So in order to make a new model appealing and look that much different, really, what do they want to do? They want you to go trade in, get a new sled. Mm-hmm. So they've got to make this sled that much different than the one you own because they want you to go buy a new sled. So the Expert got quite a bit different than the 2025 Expert with the narrower front end. The X got quite a bit different than the 25X, but compared to each other, they are also more different than they were before.
Yeah.
And maybe you see some of that product integration in the future, and maybe they hold on to things and say, okay, well, let's put all the light on the X this year. We'll come out with a narrower front end on the Expert, and then next year we'll add some of these things to the Expert. But I expect more weight reduction in the future and more things. So,
well, and I'm just curious, more just your thinking, like you answered. But I guess that's why. I mean, I can see why the 32 makes sense in the Expert. I think that definitely needs to differentiate it between that and the X. Like, I don't think the 32 is going to be for everybody. So anyway, I'm just curious, but
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, I was hoping you could get a chance to
I
know that
know.
one the day we went up. But,
yeah,
But all the Skidoo ambassadors were up there, and so they had all the mountain sleds.
they weren't going to be back anytime soon.
No,
Actually, I'm curious what time they got back, but
I talked to Tony. They did a pretty dang long ride.
yeah.
day.
Fred's like, I think they're going to be back by 3. I'm like,
They were like standing in the driveway of the shop, like waiting for them to roll.
I
in.
know. I'm like,
it's gonna be a couple hours.
It's going to be a minute.
If Tony's leading this group, they are not on their way home
Yeah.
yet. I guarantee that.
Yeah, you better pack 2 sandwiches with Tony.
yeah.
Yeah, so we had a chance to ride this 2026 Expert. Half of a day is probably what we spent on it, which is typical on these early releases. The first time we get on it, we don't get a ton of time on it, but we do get to go ride it and experience and go back and forth from the previous model year to the new model year, and then bounce around on the new models. Bruce, what did you think when you got on the Expert?
It felt narrow. Just having them skis tucked under you. So that was the first initial thought. Just sitting on it, it felt narrow.
Too narrow?
I don't know. not then.
I'm
Once I started
I'm
going,
just curious because I think that's a question that pops in people's head. You know,
Well,
what's too narrow? Like,
Right.
where do we get to that?
yeah. Once I started going, I'm like, this is narrow, and it took a little longer. You know, you always take a little bit to go from your cat to Polaris to Skidoo. Just that different adjustment.
Felt like that.
This took
that
a little
kind of
longer.
difference, Yeah.
Like that was a narrow front end, and you definitely overrode it. But the more time on it, the more, neutral you could stay. But it was still tipsy. I think it'd take a little longer to get used to it, but I think it'd be a really fun sled after a day or so on it, especially in some tight trees and just the way it handled and stuff. That you could tell the steering was like when you turned it turned with it. You didn't have that slop in there, and so I think it's a great sled. I think they've done a great thing. I think people are going to like it. I don't think it's going to be for everybody, like you mentioned. You know what I mean? But like the ambassadors and stuff, I think they're going to probably just love the crap out of it. What did you think when your first initial thought?
I've just listened to us talk about going narrower to a 32, and then you're asking, is it too narrow? Like it reminds me of back, because it wasn't too long ago we were on 38-inch front ends.
Yeah.
So and Polaris is still a 36.
Yeah.
Went from 42 to 38. Is that what we jumped to?
Yeah, there were mountain models that were 40s and 42s, hill climb editions, but it wasn't that long ago. Some of the normal mountain models were 38-inch.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of like back in early 2000s, like the mountain track back in late 90s was 136, and then maybe a 141. Like Polaris had a 141. A couple of models had a 141 inch and a half.
Inch and 3/4 was huge. Remember that?
Yeah. And then Skidoo came out with that yellow one, I think in 01.
Yeah.
The S2000 chassis that was a 151.
Yeah.
And people lost their minds.
Yeah.
151. Holy cow, that is so long. How does that thing turn?
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same concept. Like it's just new. Now, obviously, 151 is short.
Yeah. Yeah, people are back down to 146s.
Yeah.
I'm loving it.
Yeah.
Yeah. A 151 track seems like no big deal because most people are on 54s, 55s, and then from there, the next biggest group is 65, 63s.
Didn't Skidoo make a 175?
Yeah.
174. I think.
We actually there was a guy that emailed in, listened to one of our last podcasts, and he emailed in and said, "Hey, I own a 174. I want to know why they quit making them. I'm sure it's because of demand and everything, but I want you guys to ask them, why don't you make these?" And we've asked them before, and it's just they don't sell.
Gotcha.
Like they'll sell 10 175s to 10,000 of the other track mounts. So, but yeah, it's kind of that same thing. Like we get narrower on these ski stances, and we're like, oh my gosh, 34 inches, that's so flipping narrow. And then, whoa, 32, that's even narrow. Is it too narrow? Well, it's bad. It reminds me of the same conversation we used to sit and have like back in early 2000s of like a 141 to a 151. That's so flipping long.
Yeah.
Is that too long?
Yeah.
We probably asked that question. Like, is the 151 too long? That I don't know. It's a learning curve. Like, so we rode the NA I guess we rode these things the whole day because we were on the NA Expert in the morning
Yeah.
and the Expert Turbo in the afternoon.
Right.
And we were going back and forth from the X, which is a 34-inch front end, to the Expert, which is a 32-inch front end on both sessions.
Yeah.
And the Expert has a learning curve. Like even having ridden the Expert, the 2025 Expert this year,
The 34.
2024 Expert last year, like a lot of seat time on the Expert.
Mm-hmm.
The previous week, I was on the Expert all weekend on a 2025 Expert, so on that 34-inch front end. So going to the S32 front end, what did I tell you a couple times? Like going from the X
I
to
can't
the
tell you what you
Expert
told me.
was almost as crazy as going from like a Polaris to a Cat.
Yeah.
Like
It's
you
narrow.
had some, well, not just the narrow thing, but just the overall feel of the sled, because that S32 changes the whole way that sled behaves.
That's true.
It's still Skidoo familiarity. Cockpit is the same. The steering post is the same. Like you feel like you're on a Skidoo,
Yeah.
but those sleds handle completely different.
Really.
Completely different. And that S32 is just like you don't need to throw that sled anywhere.
Mm-mm.
Like you tip your head,
Yeah.
and it you got to be very controlled, like a lot of like disciplined on what you do with your shoulders and your upper body. Like you don't want to be hopping over the seat wrong foot forward in this thing and just
And then
throwing your weight
hang
into it.
off, yeah.
Or you're going to be like face first in the snow. Like what just happened? And I remember one time I was turning around. You were videoing. Maybe we got the video at the end.
Yeah. Whenever I got the video out, he was.
And the problem I had in the morning was I would get off of the X with the wider front end and get on the Expert, and then for some reason my brain is thinking, "Oh, you're on the X now." And I'm like, "Okay, well that means I got to do this." And all of a sudden I'm laying in the snow, trying to figure out, man, what is going on? Like this, like I am overriding this thing. And Fred warned us, like they all warned us, like, "Hey, give it some time. Give it more time than you typically would because you're going to override this thing."
Right.
And it doesn't take a lot of input. It doesn't take much input at all. In fact, you take the energy that you used to put into input to getting things to initiate, and you focus that energy on just staying steady and
Riding it.
and solid.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's precise for sure, the steering being tight.
Do you think some of that is in our mind, the old steering, you're ready for it to kind of dive and feel the old tracks and stuff? And so when you're on that new steering, you're still thinking that, but it's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
So you're trying to adjust for that, but you didn't have to, and now you've overrode it that much more, or expecting that, but it's not there.
Yeah.
That's probably why
There's a lot going on. It's
learning
more than
curve
just
is longer.
we made it a little bit skinnier. You got a whole different reaction, way the ski moves and stuff.
Well, did they change something on the ski? What was I looking at here? The ski leg is taller. I don't know if that has anything effect as far as, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know.
You control arms, but
Yeah.
just all them little things. I think we're so used to the
Made for a
Skidoo.
very different experience.
This is like the Skidoo number 2, where you're like, it's different.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm looking forward to. We'll be back on these for several days coming up here.
I'm excited
pretty
to come
soon.
ride again because I didn't get to ride the Turbo Edition much,
Yeah.
But
And you guys, you and Rhett and Brock will be able to get on these.
Yeah, I'm excited.
And spend time on that, and then we'll come back and kind of circle back and talk about it again, where we've all had more time to be on it. But
yeah.
initially, like when we dropped off that north slope and into that pocket where it was deep and good, I did my first pass on an X Turbo, then came back around and got on an Expert. Same thing. Second I got on that Expert, I'm just immediately like, poof.
Yeah, I remember you commenting.
It's like jumping on a stand-up jet ski for the first time. just kept coming over on the side.
Yeah.
No matter what you do, it took me, like I had to put some brain power into, like, okay, just stay neutral, and you kind of have to erase the
past,
the muscle memory
Right.
of the typical Skidoo muscle memory, and just stay on this thing. It was almost more like riding a snow bike, where I'm not moving my body.
Yeah.
I'm staying neutral, and I'm just kind of looking, and if I do this, if you just move your head with your helmet and your backpack on, that's a lot of influence on that. So if you're riding neutral and you just kind of tip your head and your shoulders over a little bit, that makes the expert do things that you would used to have to do by like really leaning over
Right.
and getting off center line.
And more counter steering. You don't.
Yeah.
I don't think you have to counter
You
steer
don't
as
really
much.
have to counter steer this thing, no, because you're riding you're riding a closer footprint to like a snow bike,
Yeah.
where you don't have to overcome leverage. You don't have to leverage to get over that uphill arm, because it's just there. Like, I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah. So I was
That's
thinking,
awesome.
while we were watching that video again and stuff, do you remember when sleds, we were going narrower, not only in the ski, but the side panels, because we were paneling out?
Right.
I can't wait to get back on that to see. We've gone narrower in the skis, but the panels have stayed the same.
Yeah, I've
Are we
wondered
going to
if-
come back to that somewhat paneling out when you're into a side hill?
I was wondering about that too, and that's an interesting point to bring up, because when we said like the Gen 4, when they went to the 34-inch front end on the Gen 4, those panels were wider,
Yeah.
and I felt that it did panel out,
Yep.
but it gave you that precision. But then they went the next year to Gen 5, which brought the panels in.
Yeah, I'm sure they did that because they probably had to.
Yeah, and so now it eliminated that panel feeling, and I was trying to look for that a little bit, like. Am I feeling the panel, or do I still have control?
Right.
And I think that's what they're talking about, like 34 or 30% more.
Steering angle.
No, it's the
the-
footprint.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So
maybe that's
with the
compensates
S32,
On the
for it.
track.
you get more contact patch of the track touching the snow on a side hill.
which would keep you out of
And-
the snow more.
Yeah,
Honestly.
and that thing drove. Like you get into a side hill. Granted, overriding it, I kept getting too far into the side hill. I would have to like push away because I was doing, muscle memory of the old chassis,
Yeah.
the old
Right.
setup. And but once I started to pick up on it a little bit, and that's why I'm looking forward to more time on it, because I think I need another day or two on it. But you start to pick up on it, and once you have that discipline to just ride it neutral, that thing drove through the snow on a side hill. Just drove through the snow, like better. I
Yeah.
would say better.
Yeah. That's cool.
But it's a more pro. I think I'd said it in the last episode. It's a more pro level machine.
Yeah.
Like they're trying to make the expert for an expert class rider,
Yeah.
and make it. I was thinking this morning. Like it's like Cat. We have the conversation about Cat. Why don't they have a twin rail? The Alpha 1 is awesome, power claw track. That thing is freaking awesome in its element, but it's harder to ride, and so it scares people away
Yeah.
at some point. But it's phenomenal where it's supposed to be,
Right.
which is what the expert is doing. Like where this sled is supposed to do its job, it's getting better and better, and it is phenomenal.
Yeah.
But it's also coming at a price of like narrow front end is going to be a different ride experience for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
And if you are just a casual guy, you might be better off on an X.
For sure. I think you're right.
But if you're a pro guy, if you're a Jay Maynardberry, if you're a Blaine Matthews, if you're a Jeremy Mercier, like the expert is going to be better
Yeah.
at what you do.
Yeah.
I think even your more aggressive backcountry riders will enjoy it. It's just going to take some time.
Yeah.
Like you really do. And like you said, that's one of the hardest things about sometimes testing different sleds, and even when we do snowshoot, you really don't get as many hours on them as you'd like. I mean, something like this probably takes more than half a day to figure out, because you've got a lot of things to overcome in your head.
Yeah.
And throttle control, body position. If it all has to change,
And you're taking in everything. You're taking in all the changes to the X, and you're trying
Yeah.
to process that. You're taking in all the changes
Yeah.
to this, and you're out riding both of them.
I did feel there was one point where I felt like, and I can't remember when it was, but I felt like you know how you get off I know we've kind of all said this is you get off a Cat or a Polaris, they kind of feel somewhat the same. Then you go to Scooter and it's different, and it's all in the steering. I felt like it was easier. It was harder to ride, to learn, but it felt more normal to jump on that steering. And I don't know what it was, but it felt more normal. If I was to come off a Polaris or a Cat onto that Skidoo, it would feel more the same.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But even though it was harder to adjust,
Right.
but I think in my mind, I'm like, oh, this kind of feels natural. But then you start riding it, and it's a reset of the mind for sure.
So doesn't that create the question? Like the obvious question is, okay, so if you put that twin link steering design on the 34-inch front end of the X next year, how much better is that going to be?
Yeah.
Is that the next logical step?
Seems like
I
it.
would
I
think so. Well, it's kind of like you saying, why didn't they put the coilover on the Expert?
Yeah, I mean,
But-
I guess I can kind of get the rear end skid maybe a little bit more. Although we kind of touched on the idea in the other podcast that we kind of have had an antiquated system for mountain sleds, and that the coilover system that they came out with definitely seems more of like a mountain oriented sled. So it'll be interesting to see what they do, in the future. But it's I think the S32 front end that they've come out with is really innovative, and I'd be surprised if they don't put it back into the X maybe after they've had a year or two. It's hard to know. So
Going into that, you'll be on it in a little over a week.
Yeah.
We'll spend 3 days on it. What do you think? Like just looking at it, knowing that it's there, that it's that narrow, kind of hearing us talk about, like, what do you start thinking about that?
I mean, for me, it's the Skidoo's always been easier to initiate. So if just when you get the Skidoo guys warning you that you're going to need to take a minute, it definitely you're gonna need to maybe go a little bit slower into those first turns and stuff. But I think, again, it just takes time to get used to. I've noticed with every single sled, actually, even the Cat, every time I jump on the Cat, I have to reprogram my brain. The throttle control is very different when I ride a Cat versus some of the other sleds, and I think that's one of the things that I think with Skidoo, I'm excited to ride the 32 and see how it feels. But the idea of I think Rasmussen even said this, like, you want to put in as little effort as you can into your riding. And so when, we learn to do that both in some of our riding techniques that I think somebody like Rasmussen teaches, but if the sled manufacturers are actually making it easier for you too, I think that's kind of like a double down on that. And so you can ride more throughout the day, and it'd be really fun to see. I keep thinking it'd be really fun to see how this performs in really deep snow. Like the super blower days. Like, it'd be kind of fun. I'm guessing if you can ride it in that much of a neutral position, in maybe you guys had pretty decent snow.
Not bad.
I mean, it was 1.5 to 2 feet, wasn't it? Or
In this particular zone where we're on the turbos, it was 2.5 feet of fresh, I would say, because it was kind of wind blown back in there, and then the base wasn't even firm.
Yeah.
So it felt deeper than it was, but it did have that persistent.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean,
2.5 feet.
They've always had a little bit more of a neutral position, I think, in the deep snow and stuff. So that, and then I'd love to see the benefits. I'm excited to feel the benefits of the new steering, plus that bump steer change and how that shock or how that moves. I think that's one of the things with Skidoo that probably I notice the most when I go across old tracks or you clip. We've had some kind of moderate snow conditions where we're clipping, logs underneath, and I think one of them we did a little front flip, because there was one there, and I just knowing. I mean, that would be something that'd be fun to see. So because that's one thing that there's little quirks that you have in your head with each sled that you ride that are going to happen, and that'd be fun to see. Because that's one of the things, like, as you're headed toward like a super hard, like, blown out hole, you're just like, okay, here we go, like, what's coming, So anyway, I think those will be fun things to see.
You'd be a good, like, ski durability tester.
Yeah. Yeah.
It seemed like on that one of those rides we did a while ago, like you were looking for logs.
I don't know what the deal was. Yeah, I tipped over on one log, went over the front of two sleds, and I was testing, like, the ejection.
We need a
seat
360
module.
GoPro on him.
Oh, we do. And on
that would have been a good day.
Handlebar of the snowmobile.
Yeah.
And a microphone. You can hear me.
Woohoo! Yeah, that's what I said. Woohoo!
Push this button right here.
F you. One other thing that changed for Skidoos across the board, the 10 1/4 inch digital gauge now has group ride.
Yeah,
that was pretty cool.
That was cool. Like, that performed very well. You can see other Skidoo riders in your group. Now, granted, we're not to the point yet where the Skidoo gauge is talking to the
Polaris.
7S gauge is talking to the Cat G8 gauge. Like,
Yeah.
I hope we get to that point.
It
but
can't be that hard. I was thinking that the whole time we were riding. I just thought it can't be that hard. There's got to be a way to have them talk to each other, and
Yeah.
for safety reasons.
But the Skidoo group ride, that was cool. Like that was really easy to use. You can push on the touch screen even with a glove on your finger and like drag the screen and zoom in and out
Yeah.
and see your rider and then orient it to north or to the direction you're facing. Like if you were like when you were stuck all the time, like I could find out.
So did you not
where
have
were.
that feature? Because you could never seem to find him when
He didn't. He's seen where I was stuck, but he wasn't coming
he's
back.
like, so I need to ride over.
I just knew where you
here.
were.
yeah,
Like,
he
don't
just
go
he
over
was
there.
like circling me. I can't find you.
Yeah, it doesn't mean I'm coming to help.
Yeah, right.
It's just but
It's
you can see where
reassuring.
you're stuck.
Yeah.
You know, I can go ride for another 5 minutes and then look back there. And,
Yeah.
I had my
That's
Canadian
nice.
friends helping me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had a group. I mean, I was in radio contact. Like,
Yeah.
I wasn't just like, abandoning him. And,
So anything with the 2.5 inch, you can do the group ride, right? Any of the larger
the 10.25
gauge?
gauge.
So what did I say?
2.5.
Yeah, 10.25.
Yeah, and any Skidoo that has the big touchscreen gauge,
Okay.
will
That's cool.
will have group ride, and you'll be able to see any other snowmobile on there. So we could be up in the mountains, and we could see you down on your 2-up.
Yeah.
You could
Yeah.
zoom out, and
See how fast I was going?
I think the range. They said like in the train we were in, the range is about a mile.
Yeah.
But if you have line of sight, it's like
Yeah.
5 miles or more.
That's pretty good. I mean, you really shouldn't get too split up any more than that. But it's nice because we'll drop into areas where we're kind of messing around for a minute, and it's nice to keep track of each other. But we have had times when we're ripping through something, and you'll go left, and one goes right, and then next thing you know, you really have no clue where everybody
Yeah.
ended up because there's too many little drainages and stuff. But
It does say if you're too far away or engine turned off, you can see last position too. So,
that's cool.
that's good.
Yeah, I like that. So yeah, if the sled's been shut off for a while, you can still
happens.
go
See
to
where
that
they're at.
location.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're still going to show up on the gauge.
Yeah.
And when we go ride, we're on a couple of everything.
Yeah.
So we don't really take the time to set this up because
Yeah.
I'm on a Skidoo, you're on a Polaris, you're on a Cat. We wouldn't be able to see each other anyway in
Yeah,
a group ride.
True.
But if you're in a group where it's all Skidoo, then you can see where everybody's at, and like every rider's identified. And I liked it because like terrain features were showing up on the map too. So it was pretty easy to orient where you were, and you could like look at the gauge. When we were trying to go find one of the guys that was not too far off, but you could go right to him. Like you would just kind of look at your gauge and just pick your line through the trees and go right to him.
Yeah.
That's
That
nice.
was
And
cool.
I mean, I have been caught, especially with the terrain features. I've been caught up in the mountains when visibility goes to pretty much zero, and you really like it'd be very easy to get disoriented or drop off something that you shouldn't drop off to. So,
Yeah.
So that's,
I do like that. Again, that gauge and that battery. I didn't write this down in my notes. How much does that add to the machine?
I can't remember on that one either.
It's
3 pounds, I think, 3.2, or is that wrong?
because it's the gauge plus the battery, so you're adding a little
Or
bit
is
of
it
weight
more
there.
like 5, 8.5?
Between 1 and 10.
Yeah, no, you said it was. I can't remember.
Well, we've kind of shot our whole point there. Gone from 2 to 8.5 range,
Yeah,
like somewhere in there.
Give or take 5.
I don't know. I've written so many notes in the last 10 days. So
I know. I've been looking at the weight loss. I'm sitting there 14 pounds lighter. I'm like, I could probably lose 14 pounds. So Skidoo's done their job. Now I got to do mine, I guess. So
well, it's just I'll say it again. Like even the Expert being lighter,
yeah,
you could feel the weight reduction on the Expert nowhere near as much as you could on the X. Like the X being 14 pounds lighter, that sled felt like a race sled. Like
interesting.
it very appealing ride quality and responsiveness. The Expert with the S32 front end, totally different ride style. Like I have to change. We need to get back out on them. We need to get you and Rhett and Brock on them.
Yeah.
We need to go figure out what I've got to do to get dialed on that thing, to really get in sync with that thing. Like I was starting to feel it, like I was starting to make my corrections and be like, nope, overriding it. Like, oh, that line was good.
Yeah.
I did that one right.
So once you got to that point, I mean, what was your overall feeling? I mean,
My overall feeling was I could do some pretty gnarly stuff on this sled once I get in sync with it.
yeah.
Like more so than a 25, and
Was-
more so than an X.
Yeah. Was there a big difference between turbo and NA in that that setup with the S42 or
I mean, the turbo always is a cheat code.
right,
like-
especially with Skidoo. So.
Yeah, like that thing just works so well. The power delivery, the bottom end, the consistency.
Yeah.
The you throw a Skidoo turbo on, and it just gives you such an advantage with so little disadvantage.
Do you think it made the 32 easier or harder to ride?
Probably
Turbo.
harder initially because it amplified what you were doing.
Right. Okay.
like if you were just kind of shooting straight across
Yeah.
a pretty thick tree side hill, but had your gaps, and you were off balance, and you got on the throttle, like it reacted in a high horsepower way. Like
You're off.
Well, it does. I mean, that is one thing we've said over and over with this Skidoo. I mean, it engages quick and fast and hard. Like it's not something that just comes on slow. So I could imagine. So,
yeah, but so here's I guess where I would come down on that. NAs, I take that X all day long. I love that thing. So light. The weight difference made a big impact on how it rides and how it handles and what it feels like. It feels like a 9R, like just that light, responsive, racy feel. Love it. If I'm going turbo, probably give me the Expert, because that's going to be like the mountain, like absolute mountain weapon.
yeah. Huh.
You know,
I agree.
Well, that'll be fun after Snowshoe. We'll be able to maybe open up that comparison even more to Polaris and Cat.
yeah. I'm curious, like guys like Nerona and Steve Martin, where they're closer to the roll center of the machine.
Right.
Like they're probably gonna get on that 32-inch front end and adapt a lot quicker than us taller guys.
That's true.
Because
Well, that's true.
we've got that mechanical advantage of the little bit of motion on the upper body equates to a lot of weight input.
Yeah, a lot of leverage.
So I don't know. Be interesting to see.
Awesome.
Justin, you and I rode the backcountries and the Renegade and the MXZ.
Yeah.
Spent a little time on that. That was a fun loop.
Yeah, it was actually. I mean, it was pretty fun. There's a pretty rough section through a little bit of it, but I mean, for the most part, they had just groomed the trails. So I mean, it was flat out, wide open. It was fun. I mean, we don't ride a lot of trail sleds, but it was fun to get on. I mean, they've got their turbo versions, which are amazing. I mean, they just go, and they go really hard and fast and sound good. And we kept joking about how it sounded like a aftermarket exhaust on a diesel pickup.
Yeah, the 900 4-stroke turbo.
Yeah, real low growl, you know. And but I think when probably quite a few people said, I mean, the MXZ was a fun sled. I got to get on the turboed version of that first, and we did the launch, which is fun, you know, because you just take off like a rocket with the launch control, and then I rode that up, and it's amazing. It's interesting, a sled like that on that type of terrain with freshly groomed trails. I mean, the amount of input you had to put into that was like almost zero. I mean, you can just sit on the sled and rail a corner at 60, 70, 80 miles an hour, and then grab a handful and, you know, push over 100. But probably one of the funnest sleds, and maybe it was more so because we were in tighter turns coming down, was that MXZ naturally aspirated, because it was super light, and I don't know, just it railed the corners and was fast, and as fast as you need to go. I mean, 80, 90, 100 is plenty fast.
Well, yeah, what did you hit that day?
I think I was just over 100, 102 or something like that.
That's wild.
And somebody hit 107.
Yeah.
Would you hit 105 or
103, I think.
Yeah.
And then Jerry Matthews, he's crazy on that thing. I think he was like 113.
Yeah, that's
I don't know, but they expanded that RAS 43X front end.
Yeah,
which is the new front suspension that you and I rode in Quebec a year ago at this thing. Flew us out there to Eastern Canada, and we rode. So that planted feel is available on more machines now.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Across the board. But like you were saying, that the 900 Ace 4-stroke turbo,
yeah,
that just every time I would get on that sled and get on the throttle, it was like being back on an LBZ Duramax with twin turbo,
Yeah.
passing all everybody else in their 12 valve Cummins.
Yeah.
You know, you got this twin turbo just laying you back in your seat, like, and it just didn't stop pulling.
Yeah, I think my neck was actually sore from
Whiplash.
from hammering those. Yeah, just because every time you grab, I mean, it was all out.
That's
So,
cool.
Yeah,
it was fun.
If you rally trails and corners aggressively on that sled,
Yeah.
you burn a lot of calories because you're just
Yeah.
constantly fighting the force of acceleration and then having to get on the
Yeah.
brake. And then,
Yeah, it was fun. You rode it kind of like a road bike or something, railing the corners, and it's fun.
yeah, that was a lot of fun. So if that's your thing, cool new stuff for 26 from
Yeah.
Skidoo in that category. Yeah, so this has been the 2026 Skidoo Summit Expert, I guess, sneak peek review. Catch the 2026 Skidoo Summit X sneak peek review. That was our previous episode. If you're on YouTube, go find that episode. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, that's going to be just above this episode. Please hit the subscribe button no matter where you're watching this or listening to this. We appreciate you guys watching and commenting. Like, the comments are awesome. We love going on there and responding to the comments and reviewing and looking at the comments. Please hit that subscribe button, though. It really helps us out. Thanks again for listening. We're almost to 1 million downloads on the SnoWest Show podcast.
That's awesome.
Available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Be sure to go to snowwest.com, check out our shirts, hats, subscribe to the magazine. Still putting out great content in the magazine there, 7 issues a year. But again, thanks for listening. Stay tuned for more. Coming up soon, I think this weekend we're going to be doing kind of a live podcast show with some of the Skidoo engineers. And we're going to have some of the Skidoo engineers on talking about the 2026s after these are released. And you're going to be able to ask questions, whether you're watching on YouTube or Instagram Live, and they're going to see your question and they'll be able to respond right there on the spot. So kind of a live interaction with Skidoo engineers coming up here. So watch for that. And again, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next episode.